Welcome back, my sales funnel sales masters and now half disc literate. Now we're going to talk about the high S. And I'm going to slow down my rate of speech for those of you that are high S's. What does S stand for? The steadiness pattern is what it's called. Steadfast or steadiness. Nurses, teachers, customer service reps. In fact, whenever a client talks about their favorite employee, or it's always an S. The S's are the nice people of the world. The S's are the only disc profile that gets along with all of the other profiles. These clash with certain other profiles, so do I, so do C. The S is kind of like the wild card. They're the only ones that get along with everyone. They're team players. Very low ego drive. They're security minded. Resist sudden change. Family oriented. Do things later. They are maddening to sellers because the S says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They're loyal to their current supplier. That's good news if they're your customer. It's bad news if you're trying to dislodge a competitor and move your product or service in. They're very loyal. They don't want you talking negative about another company. When I'm dealing with an S, now this is going to sound strange to you, and Tony knows because every time I've done this, every audience has the same reaction to this, and we do this. Say, here's what I do. I visualize pouring honey all over me. And then again, now don't be picturing me naked when you see this. This is just pouring honey all over. Now, why do I do that? I visualize myself pouring honey all over me because it makes me sweeter. And because honey is sticky, my gestures are less DI gestures, if you will. So I'm really dialing it down. Because when I'm speaking in front of an audience, S's will always say to me, oh, I wouldn't buy from you, you're too pushy. Well, that's true. When I'm using my DI mode, if you will, an S would not buy from me. I have to dial it down, be much quieter, much less focused on myself, focus on the emotions of that individual, let them know that I understand, and then I tell stories. The story that I tell all the time is about his older brother. When Ray Jr. was 17 and he scored all 3 goals in the state championship soccer tournament. And at the end of the game, he came up into the stands and he was crying and he hugged me and he kissed me right on the lips, my macho son, and he said, Dad, I want to thank you for being at every soccer game I've ever played in. I can't tell you how much that meant to me. And then he hugged me and ran back down onto the field. Well, that was a highlight of my life. And why do I tell that to the S? The reality is, I have stories for each disc profile. And every point that I want to drive home, you better get good at engaging stories because that brings in the right brain, and that's where memory resides, and that's where the emotional connection resides. But the reason I do that is I went to highest saying, well, he can't be that bad if his children love him. And in fact, his mother will tell you that the reason she married me was the way I reacted to my first 2 children. Tony is the result of his mother's and my marriage, but I had been married before, and I had my children, and my wife Linda saw the interaction between me and the children, and that actually is what she told me later drew her to me, the love that we had together. That's the way a high S thinks. So it changes the way they look at me. Whatever it is for you, tell a story that's true, that means something, that will resonate, and you're going to hear that word a lot during this entire process, that will resonate with the individual I'm presenting to. I would not tell that story to a D. What does the they want security for their family. They're looking for stability, truth, and loyalty. That's what they want. S's are sometimes what I call nesters. So if you look at an S's office, especially ladies, please don't do this about, male ego thing. This is just an observation. S's bring things from home. So if you have children and that the 5-year-old drew the sunset, you couldn't even tell what it was, and that was on the refrigerator, The S is too guilty to throw it away. So they bring it to the office first and put it on the bulletin board next to their desk for 6 months before they bring themselves to throw it away. S's will have pictures of their family on their desk. And again, they're customer service people, low ego drive, just all around good, solid people. Okay, how do we sell them? Tell them, I almost have a hard time describing how to do it. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. What? Give them the outline. Picture that you want to put the S on the railroad track. S is like structure. They want rules. They want a system to go by. So give them the system. Say, this is how it gets done. Then do it, whatever it was that you were going to outline and do. Then summarize what you did. Be sincere. Remember, they don't like change, especially if you, let's say you're selling software. And if they were involved in the modification of that software or had any input into that system, whatever that system is, and you want to change that system, they are very resistant to that change. Very resistant to that change. They truly want a win-win relationship. By the way, they're the only disc profile that truly wants a win-win relationship. Almost everyone else wants a win-lose, but the S's truly want a win-win. They believe in fairness. Close with the assumptive/summary close. This is the only one. You know, everybody says assume the sale, but that's
heard that whole life.
Right? In every sales book, assume the sale. Never assume the sale with any other disc profile. Only the S do you assume the sale. And S's want to eat the elephant a bite at a time. So you give them little decisions. And you say, well, we agreed that we would list your house and we would put it in the market for $289,000. And if it doesn't sell in 3 months, we would move it down to $279,000. We're going to average. So I'm telling you what we're going to do. And so now that we agreed on all those things, all I need is your okay here.
Is this what they mean by get small closes along the presentation?
Yes. But that's during the presentation.
Okay.
This is at the very end. This is why I call it the summary close. I'm assuming they're going to buy, but I'm summarizing everything we had already discussed.
Okay.
And then as I summarize that, I'm good that all we need is your okay. And they must
trust you.
They have to trust you. Look at how different these are. D has to respect you. The I has to like you. The S must trust you.
So I have a question, and I'll put it in two parts because and I know you have experience in the B2C market and the B2B market. So I'll twofold this question.
Good point.
Let's just talk about the swimming pool business because we're both in it, and you have a husband who's a D and the wife is an S, and the decision is a co-decision. How do you deal with that dynamic right there when you're trying to especially close on the first call, if you can? Explain that a little bit first.
That's tricky. Well, of course, the D is the dominant one, and and the D, whether it's the husband or the wife, will generally make that decision. Mm-hmm. But I will never ignore the S personality. I'm going to make sure I bring the S personality into the play. And I'll say, well, what is it that you want to achieve? And let's say that the wife's the S, and she'll say, well, whatever he wants. I'll say, I don't care what he wants. Tell me what you want. In other words, when you're looking at the pool, where will you be looking at? What room would you be looking at? That's the primary line of sight. So now I'm engaged, and that person generally, especially if they're married to a D, has never been listened to. So you're raising the level of self-esteem of that individual, and now they really do trust you more, and they're bonding to you. So that gets the S.
Interesting.
So you need to sell each individual. If you're out there and you sell to committees, the committees are made up of individuals. You better make sure the presentation deals with every individual, not just a single and not just the one person.
It sounds a little tedious, but you have to address it.
That's why we get paid the big bucks.
So
if this were easy, then everybody could do it.
So on the flip side of that, we talked about on the corporate level, and I know we experienced this with one of our clients who a lot of times may be talking about replacing employees.
Yep.
And you're selling to an S. Explain how that dynamic works if you don't incorporate that into your presentation.
A good point. A very strong motivator for an S is loyalty and guilt. So they feel loyalty to their current supplier or loyal to the employee. You have to listen, your loyalty has to be to your employer. Your loyalty has to be not to the vendor, but to your employees. We have to tell them how the employees are going to be taken care of. The transition plan has to be explained. Typically that everyone that wants to stay, if we're taking over another company, for instance, that we're going to offer everyone a job that wants it. So they're more concerned with the impact on the employee individually than onto the corporate structure. So guilt is a strong motivator. They need to feel guilty if they're not doing what's right for the organization. And you must really show concern and care for the individual employees.